And good morning to you, sir and madam and sir. Welcome to the Fantasy and Frames pregame show, Sunday edition. We were here with you yesterday morning, getting you ready for all the Saturday's games. Me and Jonathan Klinowski. If you had players like KJ Osborne on your roster because of us, if you had players like Donovan Peoples-Jones on your roster because of us, you're welcome. We definitely got you ready for yesterday's matchups. I don't think anybody could have gotten you ready for the greatest comeback in NFL history.
Well, in defense, me as a Falcons fan, I could have.
No, I felt so bad seeing the graphics or the graphic ESPN put out rather of Matt Ryan, how he now has the largest Super Bowl come from behind loss and then the largest regular season or total.
Thank God for the Bills versus the Oilers in the early 90s, or he'd have the trifecta for the postseason Super Bowl. And the regular season.
Frank Reich still hasn't bailed out in that department, so that's good, I guess. I mean, depending.
Yeah.
It's not good either way. Nate Markham, how are you doing, man?
I am good. I have a lot of matchups this week, and I feel like I'm not, I'm prepared. Let's get that out of the way. But I don't feel like I'm as prepared as when I have 25 different team rosters to set. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It makes you a little more fine-tuned when you have to go in and spend 3 days setting lineups.
It does, but I mean, okay, so that's a great question. And Keith, first of all, before we get to the question, let's how are you doing?
I'm not happy because it's cold in Atlanta. It was cold in DC. I don't like this shit. It needs to warm up. Yeah. It's going to be like 20 here next week in Atlanta, which for us, that's like freak out mode. Mm-hmm. So I'm not happy. Okay. Can't play golf in this weather, but I'm happy to be here. Just not happy overall.
Nice. Well, sorry, but I'm glad that you're happy to be with us and we're happy to have you with us. So Nate, you brought up something really interesting. You don't set your rosters for constellation round leagues?
No.
You just let it ride.
Don't care.
Nope.
What about you? Hold on though. You need to clarify because there are certain redraft that could not for me. You're asking me specifically. No, because I have zero impact. Some leagues in Constellation still have prizes they may give out. Some leagues may have penalties that they may hand out for last place. We don't have any of that. So for me, nope.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, we definitely we have draft seating for our constellation rounds playing a huge role. So how our big money leagues go is if you finish first, if you're the league champion, well then you get to decide your draft spot for the following year, and then it goes so on and so forth until you get to the last place person who they're stuck with whatever spot has been left over. That's kind of there's a lot of debate this week, like, oh, should you have waivers? Should you not have waivers? I'm like, well, it depends. If you got something on the line, everybody still has something on the line during the playoffs who didn't actually make the quote unquote playoffs. Yes. If you don't, no. So where do you stand on that side of the coin, Keith? Are you, do you have any like constellation round traditions or anything like that, or not so much?
I like to fuck things up as much as possible if I don't make the playoffs. So yeah, I pick people up. I set my lineups. I'm bitter. So I only do 5 leagues. The more I've gotten to DFS, it's just too much to try to do prep for DFS, every Sunday, and then also do standard leagues. And but in the leagues that I'm in, yeah, I go down swinging to the very end.
I love it. I freaking love it. Speaking of loving, do you love this matchup here starting for our 1:00 game, Atlanta and New Orleans in New Orleans? You've been hyping your guy up all week long, and quite frankly, you've been dropping his name sporadically throughout the season, and Desmond Ridder gets his first start here. What are your thoughts here? I caught your show, The Daily Fix, and everybody should be catching his show weekly. Just remember, just because some of us may not be here during the playoffs. Keith and Joe are.
We'll be here.
Keith and Joe, there's still DFS to play. There's still money to win. There's still matchups to take advantage of. You were talking about. I think there was a question that went out there with, Chris Olave and Drake London. For DFS purposes, we'll start with DFS first, then we'll go into like our traditional leagues. What are your thoughts on either of those players?
I mean, Olave's got a great matchup. I don't love his price this week. When you got, it's again a great match. Falcons secondary is trash, but I mean it's Andy Dalton. We've kind of seen what he can do as a QB. That's why, like when you asked, London's 4,700, and I think he's going to get at least 7 to 10 targets. I think he's going to have a big game. I do like Ritter today, though. I think a lot of people are not going to be owning him in DFS. I think he's 5,200, 51 or 5,200, which is really cheap for a QB. He can run, which is great. And a lot of people, obviously, I know, do not watch Falcons games week in and week out. Congratulations. I don't have that option as a fan. I have to watch them. And Mariota has been so bad passing, particularly the last 6-7 games, that we run the ball well. And we put ourselves in great, the Falcons have some of the best numbers in passing, even with Mariota in the league, like yards per throw, yards per attempt, all this stuff. I just think Ritter is such a better passer, and everything I hear about the kid, I just love him. I mean, at the Senior Bowl, I just heard the story the other day. They were down, needed a last-second touchdown, and he is on the sidelines at a Senior Bowl, pumping up his teammates, and then let them down for that score. I just think he's going to do well. And I think Arthur Smith doesn't get the credit he deserves in Atlanta. We had Matt Ryan last year, which I love Matt Ryan, but we've seen he's done. I mean, he's done. And we went 7-10. We had Marcus Mariota this year, who literally can't throw the ball, and we're 5-8 or 5-9. So, I mean, I just think that they're going to be able to do stuff with him. And I really want to see those first 10 to 15 plays because he's going to scheme them out. They've had a week of, Ritter taking all the snaps in practice. And I'm just excited as a Falcons fan because if you hit this is like a franchise's dream. You get a quarterback and, not the first round, and you've got basically 5 years of a QB for nothing, and you can really build your team around him.
You said let him down for the score. I thought you meant let him down. I'm like, oh, that doesn't have a good. No, led them down for the score. That makes a lot more sense.
Sorry, country.
No. That's me doing Samsonite. I was way off. That's different. So Alvin Kamara here, Nate. Let's think about here. Do you think this is a good game for him versus Atlanta?
I mean, when Keith alluded to, when it's Andy Dalton, you're going to look to pivot to anything positive. Shockingly enough, this is still a division that's up for grabs for both of these teams somehow, right? I mean, is that not crazy to think that this is a quote unquote must win game? But yeah, you have to look at Atlanta against the run. They're, bottom 10 overall. The past couple weeks for Kamara have been, I don't know, what's a nice way of saying it? Underutilized, bad, garbage, humbling. There's a lot of things. I mean, his last 3 games, he has 81 total yards rushing. Right. The 12 receptions are great. And I think that's what we're going to probably bank on. But there's nobody pushing him. Now, so I guess what do we think of Eno Benjamin? Do we think that there's any involvement with Eno in the game plan? Because they seem to have a backup that's capable of doing similar things to Alvin Kamara all year. They keep wanting to promote and push, and then it's still always Alvin Kamara. So I'll just stick with that and say it's a good game. I'm still tempering expectations from what I've seen. I think I have him at, let's see, 13, RB 13. So I'm okay with that. I mean, what are you going to do?
Me too.
You have him at 13 as well?
I have him at 13 as well. We look back to their week 1 matchup. He was held in check, 9 attempts, 39 yards, 4 targets, 3 receptions for
They were down
yards.
most of that game. They came way back. I will say, as a Falcons fan, he has murdered us over the last
That's the thing.
few years.
Wouldn't you have expected him to be more involved in the receiving game if they were down at that point?
Well, unfortunately, though, it was one of those deals that the Falcons do where they dominated the first 3 quarters, had the ball a ton, and then Jameis threw for, I think, 250 yards and like 2 or 3 touchdowns in literally the last quarter and a half. And I mean, they were straight up flinging it. I mean, to your point, yeah, you would think he'd be involved in that, but the receivers were really going. I know Landry had a big game. Olave had like 60 yards receiving. But I always tell people Kamara versus the Falcons normally is not a bad option. He's had some really big games against us over the last few years.
We got our first question here from Malcolm on Facebook for the morning. Dak at Jacksonville or Justin at versus Philly? His opponent had Josh Allen yesterday. So I'm assuming you're talking about wanting the upside play. You know, I know the matchup is tough for Justin Fields, but I'm a believer in Justin Fields. That being the case, this Dallas Jacksonville matchup, this has the potential, I think, to be a little bit more exciting. That's a great question. I'm probably still going to go Justin Fields just because I like the rushing floor. What about you, Nate?
Yeah, same. I like Dak, but I'm going to go with pure upside of what Fields can bring. I don't like the game for Chicago, but I think that they're just going to they're going to have to lean on Fields and hope that he does something with his legs.
All right.
Keith?
What about Keith?
I mean, I don't want to confuse him. So I think Fields is a great play. I will say, though, Jacksonville against the slot receivers, one of the worst defenses in the league. You got to remember they played the Titans last week, who, I mean, had no receivers, and Tannehill still threw for 2 touchdowns. I have Lamb as one of my favorite plays today, so obviously Dak will go with him. The problem with Dallas, and that's the difference to me in Chicago, or in this decision, why I agree I'd go with Fields, is just, you know, you have to worry about Pollard and Elliott scoring all the touchdowns, to where Fields is, I mean, he scored a touchdown in like 9 straight games or something. He's had 60 plus yards in 9 straight games. So that's right there, 12 points. So I'm not turning that away. Like, I think he's had a rushing touchdown in 6 straight games or something. So I think you got to go with Fields, and especially you're down. I don't see Dak having like a 40-point game, even though I like Dak this week. Fields could easily have a 40-point game, and I think they're going to be down, which is only going to help him put up more stats.
Let's go to the flip side here. I mean, obviously you're starting, and not for DFS purposes, but for the Saints, you're rolling with Olave here. I guess, did we reach a consensus now, Kamara? Like, you're starting him?
Oh yeah. I mean, what are you gonna? Yeah, right. If you had
Zonovan Knight or Alvin Kamara, would you still stick with Alvin Kamara?
I would.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
Only because I just think that game's going to be cold. I think they're going to really rely on Knight with Wilson. And I think the Jets are going to smoke the Lions even with Zach Wilson. I think the Lions are a good team, a good story, but it's still Jared Goff in New York. I think the defense is going to really give the Lions problem, and the Jets are going to try to run the ball a ton, to where I don't know what Kamara's volume is going to be, to where I feel pretty confident Knight is going to get carries. He's been getting carries. Joe was talking about he's been getting carries in the red zone. He's been catching passes. He's been more and more involved, and he just honestly right now looks like a better runner, which probably has a lot to do with his offensive line and all that thing. I'm not saying that he's better than Kamara, but at this moment, he's running better than Kamara is.
You see, and this is where I think that I think Detroit's defense is taking that next step as far as pass rush. And I think that's the concern that I have with this game, is that I don't think it gets blown out. I think they actually keep it low scoring for relative purposes. I mean, it's a 43. What is it? It's the second lowest maybe on the week.
Behind Dallas and Jacksonville.
No, Arizona, Denver.
Arizona.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, rightfully so. That should be, if there's ever a 0 bet on no touchdowns, that's the one to go with. But in all regards, I do think Bam is a good option. I think that I don't know why. I really like the progression of Kaminsky. I like what I've seen out of Houston and Aiden Hutchinson. It's that front 4 or 3.5 that is giving me pause. And I know the Jets have this, they have a really good offensive line, banged up, a little underperforming as far as what we assume coming into this season, but a lot of that has to do with injury. I don't know. I would lean Kamara, but I don't think it's as far separated as I'm making it sound. Let's be clear there. I think that it's not that far of a separation between one and the
other. So let's do a question here. Talking about now the Falcons running game. Patterson, Algier, neither. Let's start with you, Keith.
I mean, I always take Patterson in the offense. He typically gets the goal line work. If it's a game where they really start running the ball well, he's going to get the most carries. I mean, Algier is really good. I've been pleasantly surprised. I was not huge on that pick, but I mean, you look though at his line every week, it's like 50 yards, 5 points, 50 yards, 5 points, 50 yards, 5 points. And it's no touchdowns, to where Patterson, I called it the week that, remember, I went to the Falcons game and he was coming back from injury and people were like, you're telling me to start Patterson? I'm like, yeah, he got like 7 carries inside the 2 just in that game. And I think with a young quarterback, it's even more likely if they get close, which I think they will, a couple of times a day, they're going to give it to Patterson. So I like Patterson a lot more than Algier, because Algier would have to bust a big one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Agreed.
You're on board there. Okay. Let's see. Malcolm has another question. He benched Njoku yesterday, but he has Waller he picked up off of. Jeff Driscoll is eligible on Yahoo, I believe he is. I don't know about other platforms. Driscoll played a little QB and rushed the ball some. Is Waller active? I know he got activated to the practice squad the practice last week.
He's going.
Yeah.
I
like the gimmicky Jeff Driscoll option. I had a buddy asked me that yesterday. Very similar league. It wasn't Malcolm, but it was he had Njoku, could go with Driscoll, and I was an idiot, and I said I think Njoku is the right play. I mean, he's only had less than 7 targets twice all year, 3 times, I guess, if you include week 1, or which you should. But yeah, I mean, what the question I guess we have is, what type of involvement will Waller have is from a snap percentage? Will he play enough? Do they keep him out the extra week to give him 100% health for this week? Or is this still on pace for return time?
I just think New England they've had some real issues with tight ends. I think they're giving up the second most touchdowns in football to tight ends. And I mean, let's be honest, the Jacobs is banged up. It looks like he's going to play, but I mean, this is what has happened to the Raiders offense basically since Waller and Renfro have been hurt. It seems like every game Devontae Adams will go off in the first half, and then he does nothing in the second half because the defense is like, all right, we're going to put 3-4 guys on this one player and throw it somewhere else, and the Raiders haven't been able to. I think that if Waller plays, which they're saying he's going to, I think he's going to at least play, a significant role, and I just think there's a good chance he gets a touchdown. Pats they really have. They've given up touchdowns to tight ends.
Yep, you're right. Them in Seattle are second, with Detroit behind Arizona and Miami. 8 touchdowns on the season.
All right, so I guess the consensus here is Darren Waller versus Driscoll. All right, let's go now to the other side of the ball. Literally, well, first of all, Drake London, obviously a start this week. Is that an obvious start?
It depends on what you have. I mean, if you're talking about for like playoffs and stuff, yeah, if you have a loaded receiving core or a loaded running back core, I could understand not playing him, but he's going to be the number 1 target without a doubt in this offense this week with Pitts out. And I do think that they're going to throw more like that. You can't tell me Arthur Smith hasn't been all year wanting to throw it a little bit more, and they haven't been able to. And London's had some big games too.
Switching to the IDP side of the ball, Nate, let's talk about one of the bigger questions here heading into this matchup. Caden Ellis, who's played in replacement of Pete Werner since Pete Werner went out to injury, has just been balling out for IDP purposes. He's given you such a high fantasy floor, tackle floor, and now all of a sudden Pete Werner may or may not be activated to this game. I don't believe there's recent news stating otherwise. If obviously if Warner's not playing, you can roll out Caden Ellis during this matchup in every matchup.
Mm-hmm.
If Warner does play, if he is active for this game, does it scare you off a little bit that maybe they ease him back in and they kind of utilize both, which kind of lessens the floor for both of these linebackers? Or do you think they could both find, success here? Obviously, maybe not LB1, but LB2 or 3 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy answer is exactly what you were saying, in that I think it lowers both their ceilings as well as their floor. I don't know the percentage that I'm anticipating. I think what I kind of got to in my head is that if Turner is, Peyton Turner is supposed to be playing too. Sorry, that's the whole reason I said Peyton Turner. But Pete Werner plays. I think he gets 75% of the snaps, and I think that we'll see Ellis still seeing somewhere around 40 to 50% as they rotate in, because I am not a firm believer that it's going to be as high a passing game still for the Falcons as Keith is. I still see it probably more like a 55%, 45% run to pass ratio, but that's just, that leads towards multiple linebackers having that potential for LB. We'll say LB2. LB2 would be great if you could get that out of Caden Ellis or Warner, either one of the two. But I think overall it does lower both just enough.
All right. In terms of other IDP prospects here for Atlanta, Rashaan Evans has been playing consistently. He's obviously a must start here. Is Michael Walker returned to form? Is he somebody that we're kind of jumping on board with, or are we saying no, he's not really LB1 or potentially borderline LB2, 3?
I mean, he returns. That's a fair statement. I don't like Michael Walker. I do. I think he'd been on the season pretty solid. I mean, I guess he's returned, but it's that, the solo to assist has been really, really bad. Early in the season, if you look, it was almost like an 80% solo to assist ratio. The last 3 weeks, though, have been six solo to 19 assists, which is fine if you're looking just for that, minimal floor. But the upside is completely gone if you're looking for LB1 potential upside if you can't get more than 2 or 3 solo in a contest.
All right. I don't know if this is breaking news or not. I just saw it on the internet here, but Chase Young is not playing tonight.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's we'll discuss that game later. That's going to be interesting here. Okay, I think that takes us through the first game. So let's jump into the second game, and this time we'll start defense and then go offense. Philadelphia at Chicago. Man, I don't know if people need to hear this, but maybe those who don't play in heavy IDP leagues or not IDP leagues at all, but Jack Sanborn is pretty good at tackling players and getting a high fantasy floor for IDP purposes, and really good at football. There was this. I was saying this with Roxanne on Are You Down with IDP After Dark on Friday, the show that we do in cooperation with Club Fantasy FFL. And there was somebody on Twitter who said, I will stop putting up highlight reel videos of Jack Sanborn when he stops doing something special. And this guy's Twitter feed is like Sanborn. Really good at shedding blockers, just really good in general, stopping the run, shedding blockers, making those tackles. And go figure, he's going against somebody with a skill set that mimics the opposing quarterback in practice. He's going against Jalen Hurts, So whether you got Miles Sanders or Jalen Hurts running the ball, I feel like Sanborn can be a really good just run stopper overall. What are your thoughts on Nicholas Morrow, however, in this situation? Is he somebody who's just never lived up to the billing of being able to live up to that, 1A, 1B role? And coincidentally, sticking with the Bears, Jaquan Brisker, I believe, is supposed to be returning this week. What are your thoughts on both of those players, Briscoe and Morrow?
Brisker, I'm really excited to have come back. I think we've been big on Brisker the entire year. And I mean, with the lack of depth in the secondary for Chicago, it's much needed for sure. Now, I don't expect the game to be anywhere close to being competitive, but if you can get a young player like Brisker back into the fold to end the season on a high note, he'll enter next year probably as a that optional mid late DB2 conversation. He's at the line of scrimmage. He's exciting. He's around the ball a lot. Big hitter, which I think that maybe might not have IDP relevance, but it has. I want to watch the guy, and I mean that carries over into offensive side. Keith, let me ask you this question: if you have two players that you rank equally as far as your overall grades, and you have a choice between the two in the draft, you're going to pick the person that you enjoy watching that's a little bit more exciting over the other. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. The other thing I always look for when I think guys' talent is similar is like, I do think they tend to not look at results enough. Like if one guy has had a lot more of an impact on the field, I get upside, but I'm always going to take the person that stands out more, to your point, in the game.
That's what I'm looking at. And that's what I see with Brisker. He was in those first, we'll say 6-7 weeks of the season. It felt like every week we saw just some type of splash impact play. Not to the effect that we've seen out of Jack Sanborn so far, but we're talking about with Brisker, really like a 7 tackle floor with, tackles for loss in like every other game or every third game on the season, rushing the passer, 3 sacks as a rookie. Is just, all these are fascinating, I'd say, statistics for a person who probably still is under the radar overall. Sanborn's not under the radar, I don't think, anymore. I think his name has been the hot topic, but look at the last 5 weeks. Jorge, look at this. Week 10, 12 tackles, 9-3 solo to assist, 2 sacks, 2 hits, 9 tackles against Atlanta, 14 tackles against the Jets, 10 tackles. That's overall LB1 upside right there. Right. And I think that continues this week. Maybe not the LB1 overall, but let's see where I have him. Where do you have him at this week?
I have him at 9. I have him at 9. So I have him right with the Nick Bolton and Frankie Aluvu crowd. Mm-hmm. Yeah, super high on Sanborn. Just a great play. Wrote about him in the IDP Starts article over at fantasyandframes.com, which, folks, there's still time to head over to fantasyandframes.com to read all of our articles for the week. Don't worry, they're short, sweet, to the point, so you're not spending all sorts of time reading articles on Sunday morning before kickoff. However, if reading articles isn't your thing, head over to our Instagram, our Facebook, our TikToks. We have video versions of those. Not the entire thing, but enough to get you set for this week, as well as maybe make you interested to go over to fantasyandframes.com and read our articles for that. For Philadelphia, I think it's more of the same for IDP purposes. I guess, that defensive line / edge rusher situation. It's always a tricky one.
Flip coin.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. It's so hard. If I was guessing this week, my guess would be someone like a Javon Hargrave, maybe just because the middle of that Bears offensive line is the weakest. And the Bears offensive line has been terrible. That's the one thing for a team that passes as few as they do. Their blitz or their sack percentage is the highest in the NFL, has been all season. No way it could not get overtaken. But I think it's overlooked because the total number of sacks is lower than others, but that percentage is garbage. So I could see 2 or 3 sacks. Pick a player. Keith, I'll give you here's your sack lunch option of the day. Do you want Javon Hargrave or Hassan Reddick? And either one, I think both will probably get you sacks, so you can't lose.
Which name do you like the best?
For sure. They're going to be down. I am not an IDP expert, so I don't even know.
There you go.
I can't.
Do you have a quarter? Because literally,
exactly. That's essentially all you need.
We can work with pennies, dimes, nickels, whatever coin you got. You can flip it. And
with Keith DFS on the season, he's flipping $100 bills. He ain't flipping quarters anymore.
He's flipping 24 karat gold coins.
Exactly. Doubloons.
Exactly. For moving backwards, I guess, from the line of scrimmage, TJ Edwards has been, I guess, the model of consistency, although his tackle numbers have been kind of lowered the past couple of weeks, but he's been making up for it a little bit in coverage with the passes defense. He's a must start against this Chicago team trying to slow down this. Against this Chicago team trying to slow down their running game. I think that he'll have a lot of success in kind of hampering David Montgomery. Anybody else for Philadelphia here that I'm missing in Chicago?
I mean, you could make a case for Marcus Epps playing up a little bit more so, but I don't think there's enough volume to go around to more than the names we probably just mentioned.
Okay, hold on. We got a question from Malcolm. He needs IDP help. Malcolm, this is the first time I think all season you've mentioned IDP at all. Continue, please. Give us your question. Let us help you out with that.
Or maybe he's saying he needs to play IDP.
Oh, I didn't. I just made up the word help. Yes,
you did.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
okay.
I did. Okay, well, you may need help for IDP next year, and of course, we are going to be there to help you along the way each and every year. Let's flip to the offensive side of the ball. Keith, let's talk some offense here. Miles Sanders. What are your thoughts on Miles Sanders this way for a DFS play? Is he somebody that not even just because of the matchup, or somebody that you're excited about?
He should be in every lineup. He's in, I believe, every one of my lineups. He's 6,500, which I honestly cannot fathom. Tony Pollard, 7,100. Henry's 8,000. Bears have given up the most rushing yards on the season. And what I like most about this is the Eagles have proved over and over again, when they play bad run defenses, they will run it. 35 times versus the Giants, 49 times versus the Packers. Sanders has 30 or more points in 2 of his last 3 games, 5 touchdowns in that stretch, 8 touchdowns over his last 7. And then again, bad defenses in games versus the Lions, Jags, Packers, and Giants. They had 200 plus yards on the ground in each of those and 15 fucking rushing touchdowns in 4 games. It's unbelievable. Just in the Packers and Giants games, both in the last month, over 600 yards combined, 7 touchdowns. I expect the Eagles to just pound the rock today. I'm shocked Sanders doesn't go over 100 yards. I'll be shocked if he doesn't score a touchdown. And again, he's 6,500. There was several DFS prices this week that there's not an exact formula for it, but I'm trying to really learn where they come up with these things. I have no idea what they're doing. It's almost like I'm worried, just like when Vegas sets a line that you're really high on a team, and then you look and they're going, wait a minute, they're getting points. That's kind of the way I feel with Miles Sanders at 6,500. So he's going to be in a ton of my lineups. The only other really guy for DFS purposes that I would play would obviously be Hurts and Fields. I don't have a problem with you going with either one of them. Last week, Sanders and Hurts both scored 30 points versus the Giants. So they've proven that even if they run it a lot, they can both do damage. And then Fields, man, I mean, he's a cheat code this year in fantasy. And that was kind of my point to the question earlier, is just he could have a 60-yard touchdown run at any time. And I don't think there's any quarterback in the league you can say that about other than him, because Lamar hadn't been doing that recently. So I could understand playing Fields or Hurts, but Sanders should be in a majority of your lineups for sure, because there's some good lower price receivers and plays that you can make it tight end.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to the wide receiver position for Philadelphia in a second. Going back to Malcolm, he did need help. I was clairvoyant and thinking, inserting the word help. He has a question here. Pick 3: Devin White, Sam Bourne, Frankie Louvu, Jalen Petrie, Julian Love. Let's go with your 3, Nate, and then I'll give you my 3.
All right. So he said needs a tackle machine. So I would guess that means his league is tackle heavy.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean, Nate?
So it usually means it's probably more or less Jorge, if you have
more points for tackles.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you look at IDP, you can change a player's overall value, or at least the style of player, depending upon the style of scoring. Because if it's a splash play, meaning or a big play where sacks are worth 6 and tackles are only worth half a point, a person like Yannick Ngakoue is who never makes a tackle. He'll only get a sack. His value is 100% dependent, but his change in overall rankings each week can be higher than some of the guys who gets 6 tackles and nothing else.
Just depending on who he's playing, right?
It's kind of a flawed scoring metric sometimes. That's why we do the fantasy frames, fantasy and frame scoring, where we kind of normalize some things. Eventually that will be a little bit more normal. That being said, I think that if I'm looking at my tackles, I'm Sam Bourne is a 1. Man, Devin White against Cincy, I'm gonna put him there. Cincinnati's not exactly, I think, scoring. Where are they at? I'm gonna say they're down around 13 or
they're back to where
15.
They're really moving the chains. So to your
but
point,
against the line, they're 5th against the linebacker position. Again, sustained drives is another big one too. am looking at. The biggest one here for me is to determine. I love Jalen Petrie. I have him at 7 on the week, and I think the tackles will be there against KC. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna go Petrie. I'm gonna go Petrie, Devin White, Sanborn, Jorge. What say you?
So I'm gonna roll with definitely Sanborn as my one. I love Frankie Louvu. He has in the past month he has the 9th best run stopping percentage in all of football at the linebacker position. And I'm going to go with my DB of the week, Julian Love. The last time they played, he had 13 tackles, a tackle for a loss versus Washington. I think Washington doesn't deviate from their game script. Look, we need to, we play defense and we run the ball. That's the formula of a Washington Commanders with an occasional Taylor Heineke miraculous throw or horrendous interception. That's how they roll. So I'm rolling with Sanborn, Louvu, and Love this week. The only thing that concerns me with Devin White is that he hasn't been very Devin White-ish this season. There's a lot of inconsistencies with the double-digit productions here, but I could definitely see some upside here for Devin White. So yeah, those are our picks there for IDP. So good luck to you, Malcolm. Definitely Sanborn is hands down a one there for you though. Let's go now here to our next matchup. Keith, you talked about it. Oh no, sorry, I was going to get to AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith has been playing lights out.
I need him to play lights out today because I'm only in the playoffs in one league, and thanks to fucking George Kittle's. I started behind the 8 ball, but Allen kind of helped me dig it out. But Smith's going to be the guy that I need to continue doing what he's been doing. He's been hot.
Yes. I mean, weeks 10 and 11, yeah, he only got you 39 yards receiving and a touchdown in 10, 78 yards. In week 11, 50 and 12, 102 and 13, 64 and 14. What's that translated into? Close to 11, 7, 18.7, 14.9. Here's the thing you need to pay attention to. Since week 10, 8 targets, 9 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets, 8 targets. Dare I say he's been a little bit more consistent in the target department than AJ Brown. AJ Brown since week 10, 4, 7, 6, 10, 6. AJ Brown has had more of the touchdown upside, but if you're looking for the yardage upside, I think you're definitely looking Devonta Smith's way versus a Chicago secondary that outside of
it's a bad defense.
Jaquan Brisker, I can't really name you a quarterback, to be honest with you. So
it's a bad defense.
So that's where we're going there. Is Dallas Goedert playing? I know he got brought back.
No, they changed. They ended up punting him a week.
Okay. All right. So I think that's going to do it here for this matchup. Let's get into the Jets and the Lions. Keith, you alluded to earlier, you think the Jets are going to the defense is going to kind of like stymie.
Jared Goff, I love the story and everything, but he's still a guy that if you don't let him do what he's good at, he's horrible. Like if you can confuse him, rat him, which I think the Jets definitely had the talent. Is Williams playing? Is my only question, because I know that he was questionable. That would be the one thing I'd be concerned about, because then they can't get pressure with 4. But
he's a true game time. He's 50-50. They said he's a legit. They won't make a designation until the actual warm-ups.
Yeah, I still think this Jets team is better, even with Zach Wilson. We'll see what happens, but I think that it probably helped him to go through what he did. You get basically benched, and then he was inactive for 2-3 weeks. Now don't get me wrong, they didn't have much of a choice if you saw Flacco in relief last week versus Buffalo, but I just think the Jets are a better overall team, and it's going to be really cold, bad weather, and I definitely think that the Jets are a little better suited for that.
Folks, if you are wondering how you get banned from the Fantasy and Frames pregame show, comments like this are exactly what will do it to you. The Bears will upset the Eagles, so the Cowboys.
That's my boy Dalton too.
Yeah, so the Cowboys take control of the division next week. I'm kidding, Dalton. I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. Go Commanders! Down with the Cowboys. Anywho, so going back to Quinn and Williams here. did not practice all week. Again, nursing that calf injury. This is big because, you know, as a defensive lineman, he's definitely one of the top defensive linemen in all of IDP. What makes him so special is the fact that he's a defensive tackle. So breaking those offensive lineman blocks in the middle versus all those double teams, it's just remarkable how efficient he's been and productive he's been. Sticking with the Jets, though, again, we know the obvious potential downside. Oh my God, Dalton, you are cracking me up here. Anyhow, so going with the Jets, you know, and the downside, you know, Elijah Moore, I think gets bumped down a bit. But if you have Garrett Wilson, are you starting Garrett Wilson, Nate? Even though it's Zach Wilson to Wilson connection?
I think it could be you throwing the ball to Garrett Wilson, Jorge, and I think that you get the ball in his hands and he's going to do something with it.
I was so wrong about him.
It's that's the one area of this defense about the with the Lions that I'm not sold on is I think Jeff Okudah hasn't had exactly the season that I think a lot of us were expecting coming in. I think just coverage, they're meh. I think pressure and tackling from shockingly, you know, Deshaun Elliott, Kirby Joseph, Alex Anzalone can contain within, you know, plays in front of them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree with you. I'm probably Elijah Moore is probably taking a down tick. And then Garrett Wilson. What's up with Tyler Conklin lately?
Been coming on, right? The targets coming there.
They've used him all year. It's really been how effective they are throwing the ball to the receivers in the games. And that's the reason Conklin's somebody that we didn't give him on the DFS, but I do like his matchup. Lions are bad against tight ends. And with Wilson, I think his value is higher than normal, but it's really been a deal. If you look at it, like the targets are outrageous to the receiver core in the games that he does not do as well. But I mean, I think he's a top 10 tight end this year, right?
Well, that's, I guess maybe the way I phrased that was incorrect. My question is what has happened on the negative side? Like I actually had him as a top 10 after you look at the first 8 weeks of the season where he was giving you 70, 80 yard production here and there. The targets are still there, but over the last 5 weeks, he's had, you know, 2 receptions on 3, which is great, 3 for 3, and then two receptions on 7 targets for 9 yards in week 13, 5 on 8 for 28, and he hasn't had a touchdown since week 8.
They have played some good defenses versus tight ends. Buffalo is one of the best in the league. I think Minnesota is bad as our receivers. I think they're pretty decent versus tight ends.
Didn't you say New England was really bad against tight end?
New England is.
He got 15 yards against him.
Was that Wilson or was that White?
Good question. Don't know.
Because White started, I know, the last 2. I just want to say, too, I am not as down on Elijah Moore as you guys are, particularly on DFS, because he's 3,600. He's seen 16 targets the last 2 weeks. This season, when he plays 80% of the snaps or more, he scored 8.5 points or more in 4 or 5. He saw a season-high 87% snap count last week. He is out of the doghouse. Wilson threw to him a good bit last year, so they do have that relationship. And, I mean, he's pretty much been, you know, a non-factor, but he saw 10 targets last week. I think the Jets have kind of realized Garrett Wilson gets so much attention, and Elijah Moore's a good underneath receiver. And he lines up in the slot a good bit, which is where the Lions are really bad in coverage. So I actually still really like Elijah Moore. I think he gets 7 to 8 targets. And again, at 3,600, if he scores the 8.5 points I was talking about, you can get away with that and still cash. But if he has a big game, which he definitely has the capability to, I mean, you talk about somebody could have a real boom play at that price.
Yeah, that was my concern, is as long as your expectations not being more than maybe just a 2x or 2.5x type thing, because I don't see a pathway for him to get more than 60 yards short of his last game that he got, his 2 games that he has over 60 yards receiving, needed a 42-yard catch and a 24-yard catch. And one was on a 10 target game. So, I mean, I just see the ceiling is low, but your explanation of why DFS, he is a little bit more enticing.
Full PPR too, which is the other big deal.
Absolutely, which makes sense. Again, I think I need to clarify some of those when we have, a DFS definitely upside play versus my take on him as your wide receiver 3 or a flex.
I struggle the other way, so I totally know what you mean.
No, but I think that's good though, that we have an opportunity to explain this in so many different ways that people can get, because I don't know what people are listening. You never can tell. And I think it reaches more audience here. We've reached one audience member in Amber who has Kyler Murray out.
Yikes.
Yes. Now,
sorry, Amber.
Well, maybe more sorry, unfortunately, is who's left to choose from. And we know it's the aforementioned Zach Wilson, Ryan Tannehill, Andy Dalton, Tyler Heineke. Jorge, I'm guessing I know the direction you're going to go because you're a homer and you're going to really not help Amber out here at all. Go ahead. You're on mute, so perfect. That's exactly what we're going to see. Heineke.
No, that is not who I recommend.
Thank God.
Thank you. No, I'm gonna go homer in terms of my fandom for this player for several seasons. Gonna go Tannehill. He's gonna be playing from behind against this Chargers defense. You look at Zach Wilson. No, Andy Dalton. No, Heineke. Mentioned it earlier. Washington plays strong defense, runs the ball. And Heineke, you're either getting a miraculous play or a horrendous interception. So no, thank you. Give me Ryan Tannehill against the Chargers in a game where he should be, the Titans, that is, playing from behind, and he'll just need to air it out or run the ball. I think the rushing upside potentially could give him some, give fantasy managers some hope there. So out of all those, Amber, Tannehill. What about you, Keith?
I actually like either Heineke or Dalton. I know but I mean, this is where we're at, right? Like, you either are taking Dalton because the Falcons are literally one of the worst defenses versus QBs week in and week out. Heineke, I didn't realize had this good of a game until Joe Matz told me after the pod. The first matchup versus Giants, 275, 2 touchdowns. That was on the road. This is going to be at home. The thing with Tannehill, I agree with you, Jorge. The only worry I have is that the Chargers are so bad versus the run that I think this is actually a great game for DFS where you take both sides. And we talk about this on the pod all the time, where I love Herbert and obviously the receivers, but I also love Derrick Henry on the other side because it's one of those rare cases where you have strength versus weakness on both sides. So I just worry about how many throws Tannehill gets compared to potentially Dalton and Heineke. But if they fall behind early, I completely agree with you. Like, if that's what she thinks is that, the Chargers are going to beat the Titans early, I'm with you 100%. It's just Burks is out again, concerns me a little bit. I actually think Heineke's probably the safest play. And I would say Tannehill, because he still will run a little bit, or Dalton is the upside play. If you think you need kind of a miracle.
Is Burks out this week? I thought that there was talk that he could be.
I'm pretty sure they ruled him out.
Yeah, I don't think he's playing. I don't know if it's been.
That's why I love Chig Okonkwo again this week.
Yeah, he's been really good. I am going to second your Tyler Heineke for really. I mean, if I'm going to find one area of optimism, is that the Giants don't force turnovers. They've 4 interceptions on the season. Heineke, if you can eliminate the -2s, each -2 that I don't have to focus on. I would say Tannehill's my number 2. But I'm going to lean Heineke, and just, you got to hope if you had to take the chance that they're on the 10-yard line, what optimism do you have that Tannehill's or on the 5, that it's not going to be Derrick Henry? I mean, I'm 98-2 in that situation. Whereas Heineke, I think there's a chance that maybe they do something with some of the playmakers,
And y'all have Dotson back, correct, Jorge? Because, I mean, like in the last game,
he made a big play.
All had 5 receptions or more, all 3 of them. And I mean, that's a scary receiving core when they're healthy. It really is.
Dotson tied up the game 2 weeks ago against the Giants in an awesome Madden-like spin move.
And Joe will tell you their linebackers and corners are terrible and they can't tackle. So I do think Heineke would be the one that, again, unless you just think you need a home run, because correct me if I'm wrong, that you don't see Heineke scoring like 30 points or something to where the only one I could see that really happening would be Dalton, because, again, the Falcons are just so bad against the pass. Say they get up early, and you could have a deal like with Cousins yesterday where they he throws for 1,000,000 yards.
Mm-hmm. So there you go, Amber. Sounds like we have pivoted. We've made Jorge switch his opinion. He is now going to Heineke, and that's what.
Look,
just do it. Just say it. Just,
no, I can't.
On.
I can't.
Why can you not? Those are two compelling arguments. I'm convinced. I mean, Grant's my own opinion, but I'm pretty tough on myself.
So I'll say this, Amber. Majority rules on the show. Taylor Heineke. You know where I stand. Dalton Collins says, hopefully Tannehill goes off so Chick can go off. Excuse me. Keith's pick on him last week was money. Keith's picks are money. Keith and Joe's picks are money on the Daily Fix podcast, which you can catch every Thursday night live at 9 p.m. Eastern.
We had 5 guys last week under 300 that scored 19 points or more. So we've been on fire. We had Richie James. He had KJ Osborne last week. I mean, literally we had 4 wide receivers, 4,700 or lower score 14 points or more. And we both, Zay Jones went off, DJ Shark went off. So it was a good week last week. Let's hope it's this good this week.
Let's keep it going here. Next game we got on the docket here, Pittsburgh, Carolina. I believe Foreman is back this week, and Hubbard was playing well last week. Either of them interest you for a start for your rosters for the fantasy playoff, Nate?
I mean, I get the feeling that you're going to, in some leagues, you're probably going to have to. And I don't think I like it personally. I mean,
is it the uncertainty though? Because I actually like the matchup.
I love the matchup. Okay. It's the uncertainty of the touches because it's pretty evident that if given the opportunity, Chuba, depending on how you want to pronounce it, has been productive with the ball. But what we had seen early on is that Carolina wanted to lean with Deontay Foreman. Does recent success change their philosophy, or do they go back to try to? I have to believe it's probably a 50-50 split, 65 or 55-45 split, with even the occasional I'm drawing a blank on his name. Doesn't really matter. The third down back in Carolina.
Let me look it up for you while you're
while I'm stammering around saying it. Raheem Blackshear is his
Blackshear.
name.
Here we go. Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, what you guys' take as far as utilization breakdown?
I mean, it depends on who you have on your roster, obviously. But I actually think they both can eat today. The Steelers are all of a sudden like becoming a really bad rush defense. Early in the season, they were actually okay. The Ravens with J.K. Dobbins, who I'll admit one of the biggest whiffs I've had in a while. I laughed when somebody suggested him actually on Twitter last week, and I was like, are you kidding me? They ran for over 100, I think like 80 yards versus his defense. My Falcons ran for 140. And the Panthers, no offense, with Sam Darnold, they are not going to be flinging it. And I don't think the Steelers have the offense to, get up big enough to where the Panthers have to go away from the run. Yeah. So if I wouldn't be like feeling terrified if they were my flex or, running back 2 on my team. But just to Nate's point, there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, it's just because if one of them ends up getting 20 carries versus I love them today. I just have no idea. Chuba screwed everything up last week because I've been big on Foreman for the last couple of months, and he's been doing great. But Hubbard looked really good. That I finally saw the hype that everybody's been talking about last week.
Yeah, it's so the one thing where I sorry to interrupt you there also is if you just the mass of their games when they play, it's like Hubbard is more productive with the ball, but they just lean so much heavier on Foreman that it's hard. It's a confusing situation because
what's
you think
red zone touches? Do you know, like in games they play together, or just in overall?
Overall,
I mean, I know it's leaders to
but overall attempt. Hubbard is Foreman has 11 attempts to Hubbard's 6.
Oh, it's closer than I thought it would be.
Inside the 10, it is 7-2, and inside the 5, it is
7-1.
4-1. I have
inside the 5 attempts. Let's see, red zone attempts. Okay,
The one Hubbard was last week for a score, and I really appreciate them screwing up my DFS lineups that I had Foreman in because I was counting on that one. It was like from the one.
I think we spent way too much time on the good old Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard conversation.
Let's put it like this. Let's go rapid fire for this game so we can stay on pace and get to the next one. For Pittsburgh, Najee Harris, you're starting, or if you have Zonovan Knight, again, I keep going back to Zonovan Knight and the Jets.
I'd much rather have Knight than Harris.
I would too.
Okay. Obviously you're starting Deontay, George Pickens.
I would say I'm only starting Deontay if it's a PPR league.
Okay.
Dude doesn't have a touchdown. Does he have a touchdown this year?
No,
I don't think he does.
No. Yeah. He had one. He had he had a great opportunity last week. He's had That's the crazy thing about Johnson. If you look at just averages, or you look at the regression conversation that a lot of people have, as a whole, Deontay Johnson could be a wide receiver 1 to finish the season just by looking at like usage in the red zone, by looking at overall target volume. And we know that the quarterback play has been less than stellar, but if you look at inside Deontay Johnson has so many end zone targets and so much usage in the red zone. It's maybe not as of late, but let's see, 14 red zone targets on the season. I don't know. It's just not coming. It's not coming through. It should, because he's 9th in red zone targets in the NFL, and he's the only person.
That's ridiculous.
So yeah. So let's see. You have to go down to. Hold up. Wait a minute. Wide receiver 60 in terms of red zone targets to find the next person who hasn't scored a touchdown in the red zone as a result.
So you're saying he's got to catch one eventually, right?
I mean, there's no. So he is. So let's see. Like I said, he's 9th in the NFL in red zone targets. He is. Where is he at? He is top 20 in percentage in terms of red zone catches, and yet he is 0, in touchdowns. So yeah, I would think that he has to, but we played this game for 14 weeks now, and it hasn't worked out. So at some point, just sit him, and then that he can go off for the rest of us. That's what we need for someone. We need a person just to jump on the grenade and go ahead and let him sit on your bench and him put up the 8 catches, 65 yards, and 2 scores.
And the Panthers defense has been playing well. I actually overall think this is a low scoring kind of ugly game where like Pickens, maybe if you need like a wide receiver 3, because I could see, he's one of those few guys that on any play can score, 10 points. Mm-hmm. But Johnson he scares me if you're not getting anything for his receptions, it really does scare me. You should be able to find a better option, I think.
Agreed.
Okay, so this may be a dumb question here, but if you had to pick one out of the 3, we just said Deontay Johnson over George Pickens, basically, I think is the play here. What are your thoughts on Freiermuth, though? We look back since week 11, 79 yards, 39 yards, 76 yards, 30 yards. He's bound for a 70-yard game then, right? This week versus Carolina. Or I guess a tight end, you're kind of stuck with him because I shouldn't say stuck with him, but you're playing him because tight end is so shallow. But are you feeling good about it?
I like a lot of tight ends this week below him. Like, let's put it this way. Again, because of the weather and Wilson being in, I actually like Conklin more than I do Freiermuth this week. Okay. And I love Chig, he's probably picked up after last week. I've been screaming about him for a few weeks on the DFS pod, but he's still only 3,100 for DFS, which I love. I like Freiermuth, but it's just with Pickett, he throws so much to the freaking receivers. I mean, Freiermuth had 70 yards versus my Falcons on like 4 targets. And I'm like, why are y'all not throwing to him more? And I'm a Falcons fan. I didn't understand it. It's just too inconsistent with Pickett to where I think you can find maybe a better option. But I mean, if none of those guys are available,
isn't it Trubisky?
Do what it is. Yes.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm sorry.
So that's what
because I actually don't know what his numbers were before the swap.
Looking back at Trubisky, I mean, to find that information on the spot, obviously, is going to be probably challenging to figure out how he his effectiveness with the tight end, especially someone of Pat Fryermuth's ability, because he really hasn't had. I mean, I guess in Chicago he had 15 different tight ends to throw to. Remember that? Remember when he was? Then they had like 8 tight ends on their roster. No,
right?
Just me. Oh, well.
Nope.
That's the shit I remember.
So he had 4 receptions or more in both of the first 2 games with Trubisky. He had at least 40 yards in 2 of the first 3. So I mean, it actually does look like he probably gets more throws from him than actually Pickett, because I mean, week 1 he had, I think, 70 yards and a touchdown versus he didn't have a touchdown, but he had 5 for 75. Like I said, 4 receptions and the first 3 games, pretty big deal, especially to your point, Jorge, with the tight ends and just how much of a mess they are this year.
Right. Quickly, let's do this or that, this player, that player. DJ Moore or Elijah Moore? Which more?
Y'all are gonna laugh. Elijah Moore.
I'm with you. Elijah, you convinced me earlier. Nate, are you sticking with DJ Moore?
I don't want to answer. I don't know. I look at it and I have DJ Moore ahead of Elijah Moore, but not by much. And it's like, maybe I'm going to go with Elijah Moore just because DJ Moore, as missing practices. And
I was going to say he's banged up too.
It's an ankle injury, and it wouldn't shock me if that turns in. So if there's always an injury concern, I'll take the lesser of the two.
Lesser of the two. Okay, let's go IDP real quick. Let's see here. Week 14. Let's go with Carolina. You had Jeremy Chin put up 5 tackles in a pass defense for 10 points. What are our thoughts on Jeremy Chin here, since he's kind of come back from injury from weeks 4 through 10? He has 9 tackles, then he puts up 1 tackle. Bye week again, the aforementioned 5 and 1 pass defense. Are we comfortable starting him as a DB, or do you think there are other DB options you could probably play this week for IDP?
Probably other DB options, but I do expect this game. With Pittsburgh, they'll probably keep the game on the ground, and I expect a lot of more, maybe nickel or formations where Chin's going to be at the line of scrimmage more so than deep. And if you have Miles Hartsfield stepping in now with Justin Burris, and so you as a result of injury, Chin's going to probably be more at the line of scrimmage, I would assume. I don't know if I like what I've seen so far about it as far as the pass rush, which is what had always made Chin really special, is that his ability for tackle for losses, because he was at the line and they would blitz him, and he was involved as heavy in the backfield. Haven't seen that as much, but it is in his upside as far as the potential.
Right. Obviously, you're starting Brian Burns as your edge rusher, especially this week against Pittsburgh. A player who I want to say caught my attention for not the right way, Shaq Thompson. He's basically been kind of irrelevant to a certain degree, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
He hasn't had a week. I mean, when's the last week that he was, I don't want to say relevant, that's not fair to say, but as far as like had that huge big week, we have to go back to, I think we don't have to go back far at all. We go back last week.
Week, 9 tackles, half a sack, 13 points. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But still, short of that, every other game he's had, week 10 is the week that I really like the most, where he was in the backfield. He had 3 tackles for a loss. It shows that upside. I'm right. I think I have him at LB probably 20, in the late 20s, early 30s. So he's right in that LB 2-3 comfort zone for me.
How many tackles for a linebacker is where you feel like they're a stud? Like if they average 7 or more, 6 or more?
Stud, I would go probably closer to, I think average 8 is stud material, because you figure that's overall at the end of the season puts him in that top 9 to 10. It's the other plays that I really need someone to have. That's where I want a linebacker who is going to have a couple tackles for a loss, maybe a pass deflection. Obviously, you'd love to have a sack or a forced fumble or something to that effect, but that's hard to project out of a linebacker.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Switching to Pittsburgh side, excuse me, sticking with Carolina, Frankie Louvu, totally forgot to mention him, has been playing lights out. 4 tackles last week, but got to the quarterback, had good pass defensive coverage, has been playing lights out. I think, if anything, this Pittsburgh offensive line is not going to be strong enough to deflect all of the rushing coming at them. And I think Louvu could have a upside big play in the backfield, maybe get you a couple tackles for a loss or potentially get to the quarterback. So I like his upside this week. Going to Pittsburgh, TJ Watt has not been TJ Wattish. I know it's the fantasy playoffs, and the cliche thing is, well, start your studs. TJ Watt is a stud. Well, has he been a stud? I don't know where my thoughts are with that. I'm not feeling too confident. That should in and of itself tell you.
He supposedly got 2 other injuries other than the one he had earlier this year, the pec.
Yeah. See,
well, this past week was the most success he's had all season. He had 5 total pressures. He got the sack. It's not exactly, the Baltimore offensive line that we had projected on the season from last week, but he did get
remember
there.
Who is the QBs?
Yeah, exactly. Sam Darnold will be seeing ghosts again, and it could be in the form of TJ Watt. I don't dislike this matchup nearly as much. The offensive line for the Carolina Panthers is better than people give them credit for, I think, and they're growing. But Jorge, you were getting ready to say, do you start TJ Watt?
I don't think he's DL1 material. Okay. I think maybe a DL2. But I guess my lack of enthusiasm is like, man, he's just not TJ Watt from the past couple seasons. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Obviously, injury played a big role in that. Let's talk about the linebackers here. You mentioned Miles Jack and his snap percentage being a little bit lower, or at least, or was it higher at 55% that you were talking about?
No, he's not even. I don't think he's even going to play this week.
Well, there we go. So if there's nobody else here to talk about, is there anybody else here to talk about, Nate?
I mean, you could always make a case for Minkah Fitzpatrick is a must play, and I think that there's a chance with the amount of run that Carolina plans to do in our eyes. Cam Hayward is a lineman that has that upside because if there's one area of weakness for the Carolina Panthers, it's more on the left side than it is the right. And that's where Hayward resides, is defensively on the right end. And I think there's a chance that he could put some pressure in the backfield. So I have him as in that DL2 conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go now to Dallas and Jacksonville. Let's clear the air at the tight end position here with Evan Ingram. I mean, he had a great matchup last week against the Tennessee Titans, who were susceptible to giving up fantasy points to that position. He's not taking on the Tennessee Titans this week. Does he come back down to earth, Keith, versus Dallas in this defense?
Oh, I mean, yeah, compared to last week, for sure. The guy on Jacksonville, to me, that has been, there's 2 guys that have been so impressive. One's Trevor Lawrence. Since week 9, 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions is the big deal. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to see a little bit Justin Herbert type stuff where he is really processing what the defense is doing quickly. And again, you got to give him a mulligan for last year. So he's doing this basically in year 1, but it's Zay Jones, 8 freaking receptions or more in 3 of his last 4. And he's actually the guy that I love today. I was so shocked Joe didn't have him in his picks. I didn't include him because I just assumed Joe was going to have him. He has him every week, but I've told all the people that have reached out to me, he is definitely somebody that I added to it. He still is not over $5,000, which is ridiculous. And I think Dallas is going to really be able to move the ball on this Jacksonville defense. So Jacksonville is going to have to throw. And that's why, like Ingram, I think he's got, his normal kind of game in him. Maybe he gets 5 to 10 points. If he scores a touchdown, maybe he get more than that. But he's been a focal part. You just got to remember last week he was in the slot a lot. They lined him up in the slot a lot, which is a place that Tennessee really struggles with.
We got a question here from Craig Bergner on Twitter. Lineup question: pick 2, full PPR, Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Garrett Wilson. I think Smith and Wilson. Does anybody else think differently?
I love Jeudy today. Even with Rippon, I just think he's going to get so many targets with Sutton and Hamlin out that I don't know, man. It's scary. I would probably sit Devontae and play Judy, and Wilson.
What about you, Nate?
I can't sit Devonta Smith. I can't find. I mean, a 30% target share in damn near 6 weeks in a row is too hard for me to overlook. And the potential for multiple touchdowns is just so much higher. I mean, that Denver game, like we said, is a 30-point, 37-point over. I mean, they're projecting Denver to have 1 touchdown, basically, maybe, touchdown, a couple field goals. I like Judy for the PPR upside as far as the target share, like you said, Keith. I mean, him and Dulcich should probably get about 80% of the total targets between the two of them. And my biggest one is Garrett Wilson, just because I like we said earlier, so choosing between Wilson and Jerry Jeudy is my biggest dilemma right there. And I would probably lean, I'm going to go Jerry Jeudy, even though I think that the Jets score more than the Broncos. I think that just the total PPR, he did say PPR, right, Jorge?
He did say PPR.
Okay. Yeah. I'll do that.
Yeah, I'm with Nate completely. The only difference is I just think that Judy's floor is higher because of he's going to get peppered today in a full PPR. I mean, even if that was a half PPR, I'd probably stay away from Judy.
I'm going to change my mind on Wilson and go with you on Judy. So answering that question now. So thank you, Craig. Let's go back here, back to Dallas Jacksonville. We alluded to the players here for the Jaguars as far as who to start on offense for Dallas. I mean, what do you call it? Who not to start? Somebody that one of our writers, Bill Mustafa, was actually pretty high on this week in our Chasing Upside article was Michael Gallup. Yay, Michael Gallup. I'm a Commanders fan. Yes, I'm also a Michael Gallup fan. Tyson Campbell, Jags corner, has been one of the most targeted cornerbacks in the league. Top 10 for touchdowns allowed. Thinks he could definitely have a good game this week. That is Michael Gallup. And Michael Gallup has been featured in this offense. I mean, aside from getting walloped in the end zone a few weeks in a row and having to drop the ball because of which, I mean, he's getting the targets in the red zone, or at least he's getting the clutch targets in the end zone from Dak Prescott. Everybody seems to be in play here for Dallas. I'm not really too concerned. Let's go on the defensive side of the ball here, sticking with Dallas. Jaron Kearse and Donovan Wilson, always when I'm looking at box snaps, they always seem comparable. Yet it's always Donovan Wilson, I feel like, who's outproducing Jaron Kearse. What are your thoughts on these two safeties here? Is it, am I imagining things when I'm thinking it's Wilson over Kearse, or do you think they both have top 10 or DB1 upside?
I mean, they've shown that they both can produce DB1, maybe not in the same exact week, which is hard to do for two safeties, because you then have to rely on, big play between the two. But what we've seen, like last week, is that it was a good mix of both up in the box. They're both rotating, so it's almost like you're working really with two strong safeties, and then they throw Malik Hooker to play at free safety. And I think what that's going to do, maybe last week had a little bit to do with the fact that it was Leighton Vander Esch was coming off of illness, and they weren't sure with rotation between him and Damone Clark and Anthony Barr. Don't be shocked if they continue that, because I think we've seen with Kearse and Wilson that they are solid tackle options as far as keeping everything in front of them. But we might see one of them drop back, especially when you have a Jacksonville team that's passing in early 65% of the time. I think that they're going to want to leave a couple guys back and just pressure with those front four and hope that Parsons and, Lawrence and Osa and another team like Philly, I could go down the list. So I'm going to lean one. Oh man, I'm going to say it's Donovan Wilson, who I have the bigger week this week, because I think that I think Kearse is up in the box just a little bit more. I don't know why I know why. That's my guess. I feel like Jacksonville does exactly like Keith was saying, is trust the ball into Trevor Lawrence's hands, and I want the guy who's going to be a little bit deep. not to jump ship and switch back and forth. Am I crazy for not wanting to start Travis Etienne this week, Keith?
I don't want anything to do with him this week in DFS. It's just that I don't think he's healthy because he just does not look like the same back that he did for that 4-week stretch. And I think he went out of a game right before he kind of had this 3-game stretch where he really has been awful.
Yeah. I mean, here's a legitimate concern that I think maybe some of us may have. I don't have this specific one, thank God, anymore, but David Montgomery or Travis Etienne. I mean, 2 weeks ago, wouldn't that would have been Travis Etienne? I would have been yelled at for even asking that question.
What format? What are we talking about?
I mean, half point PPR.
Okay. Yeah. Do you trust Montgomery not to get do you trust Montgomery at the goal line to get these touchdowns versus this front seven of Philadelphia, or do you trust Etienne in a matchup where they're going to be flinging the ball with Trevor Lawrence, and hopefully he gets the reception upside? I think that's the big.
You think the Bears are going to be at the 5-yard line? I'm kidding. No, everybody's like.
You think this is going to be competitive? That's fantastic.
Oh, look at you, Jorge.
I think the bigger question is how many touches is Etienne going to get? Because I was just looking. Montgomery's had at least 18 touches.
Correct.
Since Herbert's been out. Caught at least 3 passes. I definitely think his floor is higher. And I don't actually know if their ceilings are that as far apart as you would think they would be.
I don't think they are. I think Montgomery's ceiling might be a little bit higher.
Especially say they get down. They're throwing a lot, running a lot.
It's sorry, I didn't mean to.
No.
Tangent there, but I have ETN and I had a lot of places, and I guess that's also why I'm probably not in the playoffs in a lot of places too, unfortunately.
I'll go ahead and tell you though, I love them for next year.
I do too.
Yep.
I do too.
Let's stick with the Jacksonville side of the ball. Chad Muma, I want to say, returned to practice this week. I don't know whether or not he's going to be starting this week.
I think he will. I think.
Okay, so he played 100% of snaps when he was playing, I want to say, a couple weeks ago. If we're anticipating the same type of thing with him and Aluakon, are they both studs this week? Quote unquote, like Keith was alluding to.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Aluakon is just new team, exact same production, tops in the league in tackles. And we keep saying this is the crazy thing is a lot of people say he's not a great actual defensive linebacker. But I don't care. I could care less if he's not like, the best in coverage and read and react and every other.
We're not trying to grade players, right?
Exactly right.
Points is all I'm trying to do.
Yep. And if I'm playing in an all 22 on PFF where grade does matter, I won't draft Aluakon.
Right.
I'll draft Fred Warner, who's maybe a little bit boring, but solid grade. I don't know if he is. That's a bad example. Maybe not. Who knows?
He's notoriously boring.
Boring. But I saw it. No, I was going to say, I think that Jacksonville as a whole defensively outside of, Muma Aluakon, and I don't know if I'm going to start Muma his first week back. I worry about that just a little bit. We saw last week though, that Josh Allen did exactly what we were hoping for. That matchup was a little more enticing though. Offensive line for the Cowboys, especially, I think this is the first week Tyron Smith is going to be back. So that could have
is he okay?
Yeah, I think so. Right?
I saw he returned to practice last week. I didn't see the report whether or not he was going to be starting or not. I could be wrong. I don't know. So I'm completely uninformed of the situation.
Fair way to state that. Then you ask me a question, make it long, and I'll log into Twitter and I'll look and see what the Twitter pundits tell us about Tyron Smith.
Okay, I'll ask you a question, and I'll ask Keith a question while you look up, and then it'll segue into our next matchup.
All right, I'm ready. He's activated, and he'll be making his debut against Jacksonville. Continue.
Well, okay, this question will still segue into our next matchup, so it works out perfectly. We talked about ETN a bit. ETN or Jerick McKinnon in this matchup versus the Houston Texans for the Kansas City Chiefs?
I couldn't sit ETN for McKinnon, just because you have no idea what McKinnon's, usage is going to be. It's a great matchup. I like Pacheco a lot this week. Like 5,900, he's going to get 14 carries. We've seen that. I think it's like 6 weeks in a row. I want the guy that's going to get a ton of touches. And with McKinnon, it's just so hit or miss, and it's mostly in the passing game where he does his damage.
Right. Yep. He's my Pacheco is my RB12, and McKinnon is my RB36. McKinnon's probably lower than most will have him. I think people will have him probably in the 20s because of the matchup. But I just don't see. I just see this being a bloodbath, and I don't think McKinnon gets the touches that people are expecting because they like what they have in Pacheco when they're ahead.
Definitely like that there. Both your rankings and your thoughts there. Obviously, Mahomes, Pacheco, and then Travis Kelce. Is there any wide receiver here that we care about? Is Juju Smith-Schuster even somebody that we're even worth mentioning in the fantasy playoffs for somebody to start this week? Again, let's go back to it. Elijah Moore or Juju Smith-Schuster?
I'm always going to take Juju over Elijah Moore in that situation for just pure offense. I mean, Juju was healthy. I feel like coming into last week, he got 11 targets, had 9 catches, 74 yards, and a touchdown. And that was against a tough Denver secondary. Right. This is not a tough Houston secondary, even though I know they do well against wide receivers. But remember, that is only as a result because their Houston's rush defense is so bad. Teams aren't even forced to pass against them. So I like Juju a lot this week. Even though they have Kadarius Toney coming back, let's not get on KC yet. We'll get to them soon.
Okay. Well, I mean, we could talk about that because that is the matchup, KC and Houston. So do you trust Kadarius Toney this week coming back from a hamstring? Okay, there we go. Going to the Houston side of the ball. Who is playing for Houston? It's not Brandon. It's not Nico Collins. It's not Brandon Cooks. It's not Damian Pierce.
Chris Moore.
Chris Moore. Yeah.
I mean, it's bad matchups. I think that you're probably going to see, if you want target share broken down, I think Chris Moore would probably get around 25%. Dorsett's probably around 18%. And then the remaining work will go to Rex Burkhead and maybe, just maybe, Jordan Akins. Not maybe, just maybe. I think definitely Jordan Akins. But that's, I mean, outside of that, I just don't know how they're going to get any offense going. I don't know if they score more than, 13 on the day, honestly.
Let's switch to defense. Let's go Houston, then back to Kansas City. Something tells me the Chiefs will just air it out a lot for the beginning portions of this game. And Jalen Petrie should be heavily involved in coverage with that. Anybody else here? Is Jonathan Owens even somebody to be in play here? Strong safety.
I think you got to be. If you're playing the line of scrimmage that much, and we expect this to be an Isaiah Pacheco heavily involved, especially second half, I think he's got to be around the ball quite a bit. I don't know if he's I don't know. The big thing with KC is this. Is it going to be sustained drives that they continue to get, long running drives, and Owens is on the field and he has this, like, when you go back to the weeks where he's had double digit tackles, they've been on the field for 70 plus snaps? Or do they have big strike plays where they beat them downfield and they're off the field, and it's not as accumulating, where I see Kirksey being the guy, the IDP player to probably pay attention to, followed by Petrie and then Jonathan Owens. Outside of that, I don't think there's anybody else. I'm not a big fan of Jerry Hughes or Jonathan Grenard. Or I will say on the defensive line, they have had how the hell do you say his name? Okagwanku, I think is how you say it. Actually, that's not even probably close to how you say it. So, but at defensive end, he's been very solid in pressures. He's I would say his last, let's see, Ogbonia Okunrankwo. Back-to-back games with the sack, 7 pressures. The Chiefs have allowed 4 sacks over the last 2 games. Maybe a sneaky name to squeeze in. I think in like my IDP Upside article, that was the name that I mentioned.
Yes, it was. Speaking of upside here, you don't have to worry about upside. Nick Bolton for the Chiefs is good a floor as any. You look at his solo assists the past month, 30 to 19. He's number 3 in fantasy points scoring. You go down to number 8, Willie Gay is right there, 18 to 8. Solo assists, 15.9 points. These are obviously must starts in this matchup. What are your thoughts on Chris Jones? He has been deal 8 the past month with 12.4. Here's the thing I love about Chris Jones. Not only is it the 4 sacks, but it's the PD, pass defense or pass breakup, but the tackles have been there. 11 solo to 4 assisted. That has been lights out. Given this matchup against this offensive line, do we dare say we include Frank Clark in this discussion as somebody who should be a deal 3 or deal 2, or is it a little bit more too ambitious for that?
It's ambitious because the tackles for the Texans are the strong suit for that offensive line. They are the true anchors that can slow down a pass rush. The problem is as they say, chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And unfortunately, the 2 outer links are really strong. It's the ones that are on the middle are pretty much non-existent. And so you just have, as long as people aren't running into the outside poles of the fence, the entire middle is open. And that's where Chris Jones is going to live. The matchup against, supposed to be Kenyon Green. They have tried to swap out others. They've moved in Jimmy Morrissey. They've moved in, what's his name? McCrary, I think, was the one who got hurt. It's been a revolving door at left guard, and Scott Quisenberry's been a staple in the center, and he sucks. He's terrible. Probably the worst ranked center in the NFL, and I love Chris Jones. He's my defensive line 4 on the week.
All right, let's go to Arizona.
One more. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, go for it.
Chris Moore, 4,200 versus Kansas City.
Yes.
Freaking love him today. Saw 11 targets last week, 10 receptions. Pierce is out. They're going to throw it even more. On DraftKings, the Chiefs have allowed 4 of the last 5 weeks a wide receiver to score 30-plus points.
Yep.
I think he's a great play at that price.
Yeah, that's what we were when we first jumped in. I gave him pretty close to a 30% target share, I think, in this game, and I think that might even
11 of 27 pass attempts last week.
There you go. I don't know what that math is, but I'm guessing it's somewhere close to 30-something%.
Oh, it's over 30.
Or 40, I mean 40, yeah, 40%. 40.41.
All right. The matchup that we're all paying attention to this week, everybody should be paying attention to. It's going to be the matchup of the day of the entire fantasy playoffs for the next 3 weeks. Talking about the Cardinals, talking about the Broncos, not being serious at all with what I was just saying. Brett Rippon, Colt McCoy. I actually like this for the Cardinals. I like Colt McCoy. I like the fact that, not for playing Colt McCoy, but I do like this for him and targeting DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is definitely still a must start, even though it's Colt McCoy passing him the ball. And you mentioned Brett Rippon targeting Jerry Jeudy earlier, hyper targeting him. We saw the report last week, and we've seen the report all season long with Russell Wilson and Greg Dulcich. Is Dulcich still a play, even though it's Rippon? Yes.
Cardinals 31st on DraftKings and points allowed. And, who else are they going to throw it to? Hamlin's out too. So, they've been lining him up at receiver the last 2 weeks. So that's only upping his targets and potential targets. He would be a tight end that if I didn't have Kelsey, there's literally not another tight end that I could sit him for with this matchup and the amount of targets that I know he's probably going to get this week.
Averaging 15 points per game allowed to the tight end position are the Arizona Cardinals. No Courtland Sutton this week. Anybody else here for this matchup on offense that we're pretty interested in, or can we flip over to defense?
Yes. I like both on DK, Latavius Murray, and even Marlon Mack more. You can run on the Cardinals. Obviously, I think that's what the Broncos are going to try to do. Mack is, I think, 4,000 this week. Murray's only 5,100. And then again, on the other side, I think if the Cardinals are going to have success, is James Conner is the guy. Because, again, the way to this is a really good defense, but the way to get after the Broncos is to run on them. So the running backs are the guys that I think have the most likely huge game, to where even as much as I like Jeudy and Deloach because of the target share and stuff, I don't see with ripping them, having huge games.
Very cool. Let's switch to IDP. Let's go to Broncos. Was it last week that Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton both had 17 tackles, or was that the week before?
I think it was last. No, was it against? Did they against the Chiefs?
Let me pull it up here. No dead air because I'm saying.
Yeah, I did 17. No, it wasn't last week. Not 17. They had Josie Jewell had 10 tackles. Singleton only had 6. So you probably have to go back to week 13.
Right. So 18 tackles for Jewell, 16 tackles for Alex Singleton. I think both are in play this week. Are they? I say, in play. They're just always in play. For Arizona, Isaiah Simmons. Here's
hold on. I think there's a better play than that's going overlooked for Denver, and I think Baron Browning is a great matchup.
Defensive lineman. Okay.
Yeah, I mean outside, really edge rusher, defensive lineman
for fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't like this. The Arizona offensive line has been susceptible. I think Colt McCoy is not necessarily as fleet of foot as Kyler. I think we can assume and say that. I just like what we've seen with Baron Browning sporadically, and I think this matchup is one to pay attention to. I'll tell you on the other side, going forward, if you have a chance to look ahead to week 16, I would pick up the Denver Broncos edge rusher in Randy Gregory if he's available in your IDP leagues, because I think he might play this week, but I believe it's next week is he's going to be back and at full health. I got to say, I like what we had seen out of Randy Gregory prior to the injury. I'm thinking it sustains, and we know with Denver, they're always going to be relatively dangerous. And the matchup itself this week would be good. Next week would be great against the Rams. Love that matchup next week.
For IDP on the Cardinals, Isaiah Simmons, he's great, especially in sleeper when you're looking at somebody who's both linebacker and defensive back eligible. That is lovely. Zaven Collins, though, is Zaven Collins somebody that we're thinking about not even LB3?
I mean, if you have to, sure, but I would rather go higher upside. Collins hasn't had a week in what feels like forever where he's had more than 5 tackles. I think that's what he's averaging is like 4.9 over the last month. It's such a limited floor. He's not doing anything else with that. There's no linebacker out. Again, like you said, maybe Isaiah Simmons is the one that I would look for besides Buddha and Jalen Thompson. That's it.
There we go. That's the last 2 I was going to mention. Yep. Let's go to this next one. Should be really quick to go through. New England at Vegas. Obviously, Devontae Adams always has the upside advantage there. We talked a little bit about Darren Waller potentially being the release valve there for Derek Carr. Josh Jacobs. How is
they say he's going to play, but he is definitely banged up.
Okay. Yeah. And definitely a tough matchup versus New England. Only they're allowing the second fewest points to the running back position, but the volume still should be there. RB2, solid RB2 this week, Josh Jacobs, or not? Are we still thinking he's still in the top 12?
I mean, I have him in the top 12 just because I have a hard time getting away from a person who's made up, 30-40% of the entire team's
the number one running back in fantasy football.
Yeah, it's like the New England matchup is by far the most difficult that he's had in a couple weeks. But we saw it last week, man. He had to leave the game. He was supposed to probably not return to the game with that hand injury, and the first thing they do is give him the ball back and run him to the left side, which put the ball in his good hand and made him stiff arm with his broken hand. I thought that was rather bold. And I think someone pointed out, they go, well, this just tells us that the Raiders are done with Josh Jacobs at the end of the year because they're just going to go ahead and let his hand, get destroyed in these matchups. Fall off would be, a possibility.
Yeah. On the flip side for the Patriots, is Stevenson out? I saw that he was questionable.
Another game time decision.
Yeah, sucks.
I love Pierre Strong on DFS this week. I'm going to have him in a few lineups just in case. He's 4,000. The Raiders really struggle with running backs. He showed how explosive he could be last week. And I think he still gets involved because Harris is out. Like, I think that he's the one that's more likely to get a few carries from Stevenson, even if Stevenson doesn't play. I mean, does play, but if Stevenson doesn't play, man, I love Strong this week at 4,000.
For the wide receiver, no Devontae Parker. Jacoby Myers is Jacoby Myers. I don't know. That's pretty much the running back position
Mac
is all
Jones
I really
is
care.
Mac Jones.
Mac Jones is Mac Jones.
Raiders get pressure too, which is what scares me about the Patriots passing game today. Pat's offensive line's not great, to say the least, and the Raiders consistently get sacks.
Mm-hmm. On the flip side, let's go with the Raiders. You mentioned sacks. Let's talk about Max Crosby. Obviously, he's a must start this week. Anybody else for Oakland for Las Vegas that we're caring about? Does Chandler Jones even get on the action, or is it mostly you're rolling with Max Crosby here?
Dude, it's hard.
Revenge game.
I mean, that's one way to look at it. I look at what he's done look at what Chandler's done over the last 3 weeks. I mentioned him 3 weeks ago, and it turned into, now that over the last 3, I believe, if I look it up and see, I'm just going to spitball. I believe he's second in the league in pressures over that time. He's been getting to the quarterback, very disruptive. He's had sacks now, or at least, part of sacks in 3 of the last 4, I believe, or 2 of the last 3.
Yeah. So 3 and 4, 3 and 1. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's getting to the quarterback. I think the matchup is probably definitely more Max Crosby's way, but I don't have a problem with Chandler Jones as much as others. I think that he's not paying dividends yet. Still a terrible signing, no doubt. The money was shit, but I love Max Crosby. I think Jerry Tillery's done a good job to get Max Crosby even more one-on-ones. I think that was an underappreciated signing for the Raiders. Denzel Perryman, linebacker. You have to love a linebacker against the Patriots if they're going to run the ball as much as we, anticipate them doing so. On the season, the Patriots are, top 12 in points allowed to the linebacker position. So I think that continues. And then that's about it, buddy. I don't like any of I'm not a big Duron Harmon or Trayvon Morig fan as much as maybe others would be. I mean, maybe 3s.
Right. Flipping to New England, obviously Matt Judon, Kyle Duggar. But Uche, Josh Uche has been playing lights out, 7 tackles week 13, 5 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 sacks. What does that mean for fantasy points when Fantasy Pro scoring 21.8, 26.3? Man, he's the hot hand is going at the right time here for this defensive line or these edge rushers here for New England. Is he somebody that you're starting against the Raiders in this matchup this week?
I mean, how could you not? I mean, he's as far as I'm concerned, the last 3 weeks, he's been the guy. Actually, if you go back, if you skip past the off week of 10 and even 11, where he was even really there, week 9 against the Colts, he had that was his coming out party, really. So, I mean, he had a 3-sack game. And then since week 8, second half of the season so far, he's had 11 sacks.
That's
10
crazy.
sacks. 10 sacks over the last 6 games played. Really 5.5, because I don't count that week 11 against the Jets as even a game worth noting.
Sure, right. No, that is crazy. That is crazy.
Yep.
Going over to the next matchup here, we got the Chargers and the Titans. I mentioned my appreciation for Tannehill, although you guys brought up very good points as far as this being a Derrick Henry game. No Treylon Burks this week. For IDP, Danico Autry is out for the Titans this week.
Derwin James is out.
Derwin James is out.
I don't know if he's out, like if it's been confirmed, but he's out. He's
doubtful.
Not playing.
He didn't play last week. He's probably not going to play this week.
He hasn't practiced yet this week, yeah.
But however, why am I forgetting his name? Linebacker for the Titans who came in relief last week. I thought it was going to be Dylan Cole. But
Monty Rice.
Monty Rice.
It was technically Dylan Cole, but Monty Rice was the number 2, and he just happened to be more involved in the game as far as the run play tackles.
Khalil Mack should have a very choice matchup this week for the Chargers. Anybody else? Drew Tranquil. linebacker for the Chargers. Am I missing anybody else with no Derwin James potentially?
I mean, as a Alohi Gilman, maybe, but I think Nasir Adderley could be more at the line of scrimmage. But again, I don't like any of those bad tackling options against Derrick Henry. I think that it's probably better left to avoid.
Right. Okay, let's go to our next matchup here: Cincinnati and Tampa Bay. Keith, I want to say that Jamar Chase was your expensive tier wide receiver versus, if you could rank any of the wide receivers here in this game, on both sides of the ball, Jamar Chase is like leaps and bounds above the Evanses and the Godwins, right?
I have Jamar Chase as the number one receiver for the Sunday slate.
Okay. Well, that should tell you everything there. Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine. If you had, what are our thoughts on Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine?
I like Perine for DFS. I like Perine better than Mixon, but I would look elsewhere if you're talking daily fantasy.
Right. So we saw Perine in week 13, 21 attempts, no Joe Mixon in the lineup. When Mixon came back, we saw Mixon with 14 attempts compared to Perine's 4. Mixon had 96 yards, 6.9 yards per carry. He was, not as involved in the passing game as Perine was. Against this Tampa defense, no Vita Vea up front to kind of clog their running lanes. And this offensive line for the Bengals has been playing a little bit better in recent weeks. They're kind of getting back to true to form. It helps when you have somebody on the outside like a Jamar Chase to kind of spread out a defense here, not having the linebackers creep so much closer to the line of scrimmage. I feel like Joe Mixon is, I don't want to say safe, but he's definitely a confident start this week. Obviously, you probably don't have better options than that. Or do you? Again, let's go back to, I keep bringing up his name, Zonovan Knight versus, the Jets.
Guy, you know what my answer is.
See, Nate, what about yourself? If you had to pick an upside play, obviously you're probably starting Joe Mixon. But if you had to pick somebody who's going to perform higher or lower than the other, who would you think plays better?
I mean, I'm still taking Mixon. I just can't see. I don't see a situation that if they play 10 games, that Zonovan Knight has 7 better games than Joe Mixon. And don't get me wrong. I like the matchup for Knight, but I think we're taking a player that has this perceived higher ceiling because I think his upside versus what rationale or what expectations going into the season were so much. Like Joe Mixon, we have like an established floor, and him having 24 points is like, okay, well, I expected that. If Zonovan Knight puts up 23, place would go, everybody will go crazy. But in reality, he still underperformed Joe Mixon. I know that sounds simple, but I think that's the problem that a lot of us, myself included, gets involved in is I want someone to exceed my expectations. Well, if my expectations are 6 points less than the other, they need to exceed by 7. And I don't see that happening. If that's
no, that's
fair.
That's the answer. Let's go here now. T. Higgins, did he have an injury last week? Is that what that was?
Yeah, they're both questionable.
Did you hear about
which
that?
Which is another reason I like Chase.
No, I didn't hear about this.
So Higgins re-aggravated that his injury, his quad or his calf or hammy in
pregame warm-up. That's what it was. Okay.
And then he actually, this is what I've read, and I don't know, I didn't get a chance to speak to Zach Taylor or anybody specifically, of course, but they said he basically ran onto the field in the opening drive, and he wasn't supposed to be. Like they weren't going to let him just go out, and he went out there and then basically got injured while, taking charge and just saying, I'm going to play. And then bam. But him and Tyler Boyd both are supposed to play this week. They're at least, according to Schefter, they're expected, quote unquote.
Okay. Let's see. So are you starting either Tyler Boyd or T. Higgins? Tyler Boyd obviously in the flex. T. Higgins as a wide receiver too.
Ugh, man.
You're shaking your head there. No.
Higgins has had 2 games where he's played and then been gone by the first series. In the playoffs, I can't risk that. And I think you can find a better option than Boyd.
Yeah, I hate that you even have to have that situation because it's hard. I mean, if you are facing at this point in the season, you're looking at Higgins as your 2, even if he's your 3, you're faced with a situation like, I mean, what do you do? Let's say it's Van Jefferson or
Robert.
That's
different.
But that's where a lot of people have,
right.
like ECR rankings is right there. I mean, I think it's totally different. I agree with you. I'm starting Higgins. It would require a person like I probably would have started Higgins over Thielen, and I would have been wrong. But someone like Josh Palmer, let's go that route.
All right.
Here's Palmer, who had a pivotal role. We know that now with Mike Williams playing, Keenan Allen getting all 3 against a Tennessee secondary that is terrible. Do you go with Josh Palmer or T. Higgins?
I would go with Palmer. I know he's got less targets than he was getting, but he's still got, I think it's 14 targets the last 2 weeks. And what I really like about Palmer and why I love Williams, he's my favorite receiver this week at his price on DK. They're both big play guys, which that's all the Titans do. They just give up 20-yard plays. I mean, it's ridiculous. Last week, I think they gave up 6 more after I just talked about they had given up like 20 over their last 3 games. So I think, again, just because Higgins, I mean, I can understand rolling the dice. It's just, for me, I'm a warrior. I would be terrified that he go out there, re-injure it, and then you get like a goose egg, and that can end your season real quick.
It did. That's why I'm not in the playoffs in my home league, despite scoring the most points in the league, is T. Higgins playing. If they had said in pregame workouts that, he had re-aggravated, like the J-Ron curse. I took J-Ron curse out, and J-Ron curse comes back.
That was a good catch.
Except he come back and put up like 8 tackles. The hell happened? That was crazy. But you know what I mean? It's like the Tyler. Let's talk about Tyler Boyd though, real quick with you guys, because I do want to know, because finger injury obviously limits. I would say reception upside in terms of his ability to actually catch the ball. We saw him drop that touchdown pass 2 weeks ago, which was huge against the Chiefs.
Right.
Is Tyler Boyd too hit or miss? Is like if you have 2 flex spots, Keith, is he too far down to even be your flex number 2?
It probably. No, man. Actually, no. I'd say you watched San Francisco last week with a rookie QB throw the ball pretty easily on this defense. So with Burrow playing the way he is, I don't think if it's a 2 flex, I can't not put Boyd out there.
Trenton Irwin in your conversation still, or is he just gone?
I was really hoping that Higgins and or Boyd were going to be out, and I was going to put him in a lot of DFS lineups. But I still don't hate it because I still will see how much they play him. Yeah. But I really just think this is a monster Chase game. If you look what Chase has done, basically, other than the week that he came back from injury, which he still had 97 yards, he scored 30 points in 4 of his last 5 games in DraftKings. And this is, I mean, just think about what these 2 dudes have done now going on 3 years together. I don't think Tampa has any way to stop them.
All right, let's go to the other side of the ball. Obviously, Chris Godwin is a must start. He's just a monster. Mike Evans, is he a sit candidate here this week versus the Bengals, or do you think they're going to have to rely on him to kind of stay back, keep themselves in the game?
Joe gave him on the pod as a median tier flex play, and I loved his reasoning. Evans is still getting the targets that he always has. And again, you want to talk about touchdown regression as somebody who had Evans in a bunch of leagues this year. That's why I'm not in the playoffs in a bunch of leagues. Joe convinced me that before this season is over, Evans is going to have a monster game. Like, it's just going to happen because he's too talented of a guy and he's getting too many targets. So, no, I couldn't sit Evans unless I had a lot of really good options. I think they're going to be down 2 in this game.
Yeah. And I think that the one key thing, they say an apple a day keeps a doctor away. An apple a day will make DFS pay. And that's Mike Evans on the week. So I had to move it. Yesterday, I had a customer in at work and was talking about fantasy. He is now said he's going to be a subscriber and a listener. I gave him Joe and Keith's information as far as to follow there for his DFS. He does Underdog. And he had a question about Mike Evans. And I happen to have the Fantasy Pros rankings up. And he's like, God, he's like, if you could will Mike Evans into being a play, and I had him at wide receiver 30 at the time. And I thought, I don't hate that because where range of outcomes like, but
right.
Eli Apple. And so I moved him to wide receiver 24, which was a low end wide receiver 2. And he was content with that because that's the only amount of production he really needed. And so that's what I'm going to bank on. We will see.
Let's go to the other side of the ball here, talking about defense. Logan Wilson just went off last week for the Bengals, trying to shut down this running game for the 49ers. And I guess we skipped over Fournette versus Rachaad White. I guess, obviously a tough matchup versus San Francisco last week. Are we still riding the hot train of Rachaad White that he had been establishing in the season over Fournette? And is Fournette even startable, even as a flex option? Nate, let's go with you.
Man, he's startable if. Oh God, I have him. I mean, he's a flex RB
Right.
for me. So maybe in a half point flex, or even especially in the maybe more standard leagues where you wouldn't put a wide receiver into your flex as much. But I really like what I've seen out of Rachaad White a lot more personally.
Right. I mean, even against San Francisco last week, I mean, he had the more rushing attempts, it's interesting. He had more rushing attempts, but Fournette had more targets, which I really thought would have been the other way around. But it's football.
We don't
right?
know. Yeah, we don't know shit, do we?
Exactly. However, sticking with IDP, Trey Hendrickson is out with a broken wrist.
Yeah.
At least for this matchup, we don't know. Although they didn't put him on IR, and I was reading some of the coaches' comments during the week where it's like, well, we just may have to like put a club on.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, yeah, okay.
Quinnen Williams. I know jumping all around. Quinnen Williams is out for this matchup, Keith.
That's not good.
And Aaron Donald is out. We know that. This is kind of bigger news for Jacksonville. Dallas, Trayvon Walker is out. And it's just one added piece as far as depth that I think Dallas from a running game will probably look to do a little more damage. Not that they weren't going to do enough anyway, but sorry, Jorge, you may continue.
That's good. Jesse Bates has been outplaying Von Bell a lot lately. Is Von Bell even somebody that we need to worry about starting this week? Let me use an example here. Let me put let's talk about this. Let's talk about this matchup. Is Logan Ryan somebody that you would play over not Keanu Neal, but Von Bell this week?
No, probably not. Not with Edwards and Antoine Winfield back.
Oh, they are back this week. Okay.
Yeah, that's to the best of my knowledge. I believe they are both back.
Okay.
That's the one thing about what the hell's the name? The Buccaneers. Gee, Christmas. Golly. I had telling you. I got 17 different things up and trying to verify as of late. If you look at the Bucs against the safety position, I've seen now in like 7 straight weeks, they've allowed a double-digit point score to the safety position. Most importantly, has been up at the line of scrimmage, or at least wrote a heavy enough percentage of the line of scrimmage. We've seen them get their fair share of points allowed. So I'm comfortable with Von Bell. I think Bell and Bates both could put up double digits. I don't know if they'll both be defensive back ones. I have Bell at 14. I have Bates at like 33. So I might move Bates up just a smidge, but I like Bell there as a low end DB1, high end DB2.
For those who play in cornerback specific leagues or deep leagues where you have like 3 defensive backs or whatnot, here's a name that we hadn't talked about all season, but has been playing really strong. And he's a cornerback for the Bengals. Cam Taylor-Britt. This guy has been playing very well since week 11, 12 tackles, 8 tackles, 3 tackles, but a pick, 6 tackles, but a pass defense, 6 tackles, but 2 passes defense. For fantasy points. That's 15.8, 15.3, 5.3, 11.3. Should be targeted quite a bit here. I want to say his passer rating allowed is also not optimal. So just somebody throw in there. tackle for a cornerback is obviously a rare thing. I think of
Mm-hmm.
when I think of that, I think of a Jalen Ramsey who's just playing, man coverage. So just Cameron Taylor Britt, somebody that you should keep an eye on today. Let's go down to the Sunday Night Football matchup. We talked about it earlier. Washington, New York. You guys heard about Dayton Joe's and take on Taylor Heineke. Played well against the Giants last week, but here's the thing. We just saw earlier no Chase Young is playing. I think that, increases the rushing upside for Daniel Jones. We looked at Daniel Jones' production from a fantasy standpoint. He got you like 17.1 points against the Commanders, but it wasn't due to touchdowns. It wasn't due to passing yardage. It was due to the rushing upside. And now you take away the upside that you had with Chase Young from a real football perspective, that Daniel Jones is going to get his. Saquon Barkley is going to get his. On the flip side, the Brian Robinson versus Antonio Gibson, debate still rages on. I think they always roll with a hot hand here. So I feel like in terms of consistency, you may be able to find a better option there. But I do know one thing. One of these players is going to find success. It's just really hard to pick which one. Terry McLaurin can run routes against any cornerback in the NFL. I truly believe that. The question is, does Taylor force feed the ball to him? I don't know. Keith, you brought it up earlier. Curtis Samuel, was targeted last week. Jahan Dotson, not last week, but 2 weeks ago. Jahan Dotson played well, had that, game-tying touchdown there. These receiving weapons here for Washington are plentiful. This should be a really good matchup, but sticking on the defensive side of the ball, obviously for Washington, Cameron Curl really high on this week, played lights out versus the Giants a couple weeks ago. Jamin Davis has actually been playing really well at linebacker lately. I think he has low LB2, LB3 upside. He played again really well against the Giants. He had, I want to say, he was a high LB2 in that matchup. On the flip side, for New York, Nate, you're pretty big on Azeez Ojulari. Can you talk more about that a little bit?
Yeah, Washington can't stop pass rushers. They suck at it. And Azeez Ojulari, since returning, has been, I don't want to say phenomenal, but he's been excellent. He got 3 sacks over the last 2 games, 10 pressures in that time, which is 6th amongst edge rushers over that time, and a 21% run rate. So he is getting everything that he needs to do as far as the push. And if you add in a healthy Dexter Lawrence, you add in a healthy Leonard Williams, you add in Kayvon Thibodeau and Wink Martindale-led defense, I like Ojulari. I do. What week did the Giants and the Commanders play in last time, Jorge?
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
12, 13.
And Washington's coming off a bye.
Correct. So, because that's the one thing, because I'm intrigued with this with Julian Love a lot, as you said, because it's crazy to think. Like, I assumed that his production against this Giants team, against this Commanders team, was probably because he was at the line of scrimmage or in the box very heavy amounts. Would that be fair to assume that's kind of what I was thinking?
Yeah, creeping up there, but
and I was wrong. No, I think the big thing was he was on the field for 85 snaps that game. 85 snaps, 52 of which were at deep safety. I want to watch them. I want to monitor and see, and I hope that he plays a little bit more in the box. I think that maybe he will. And this is the reason, because I think Jason Pinnock, who came in and they were concerned with maybe what he could do deep, has proven that he's capable playing deep. And I think maybe they'll move Love up. So I'm going to stick with what you were saying. And I have Julian Love as a high-end DB1 already. I'm going to move him. Man, God, how'd I overlook where I have him?
I may be too high. I have him as my number 1 DB this week.
He's my number 1 too.
How about that?
What the hell's going on with? And how did I not say him earlier? Who was asking me that? Who asked earlier? Malcolm? Holy shit, Malcolm! If you're listening still,
yeah,
he might have to switch.
Yeah.
Sorry, Malcolm.
Let's see here. I think that kind of wraps up everybody for this matchup. Unless somebody else has another name, let's go to the final matchup of the Week 15 first round of the fantasy football playoffs. We got the Rams and Green Bay. Preston Smith is in line for a pretty huge day against either side of this offensive line for the Rams. Green Bay, sticking with Green Bay, Devondre Campbell's playing, so high on him. Adrian Amos. What do you make of Adrian Amos at the safety position?
I mean, I like Amos in this matchup personally, just mostly as a result that I don't think the Rams can push the ball downfield too much. I think everything stays in front. They've leaned on Akers pretty heavily, and I think that stays. I just don't know if there's enough volume to really have him much higher than where I believe I probably have him at like 22, 23, somewhere around there. Nope, I have him a little bit further down. I have him as a DB3 on the week. So that's about where I have him at right there. I do say I like Kingsley Enagbare as an upside play too at defensive line for someone who can rush the passer against this Rams offensive line.
There we go. Bobby Wagner for the Rams. You're obviously starting. Taylor Rapp has been playing a little bit better as of late. Just putting that out there. For the offensive side of the ball, Keith, let's go here. If you had to start one, Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon in this matchup, who would you start?
No, I always would start Jones if I have to start one of them. I like his versatility, the pass catching. And it's just Dillon either is really good or really bad. Jones's floor is much higher. I don't like anybody, though, in this game. I'm just praying Alan Lazard has a good game because I will have him going in the one league I made the playoffs on Monday, and my opponent will be done. But I don't feel great about anybody in this game. I can't believe this is a Monday night game. They should be able to flex this shit.
I actually like A.J. Dillon. I mean, not so much over Aaron Jones. I agree with everything you said about Aaron Jones. I like A.J. Dillon. No Aaron Donald. I just feel like that's going to make the center of that line more susceptible to just the ground and pound. We saw that the past few weeks that has kind of been Green Bay's MO, kind of shifting to getting these guys going. Both of these guys, not just one versus the other. Christian Watson, obviously, I think is a must start this week. He's just been too good. He's just been too good for too long. We've seen the touchdown upside, but now we're starting to see the receiving upside as well. Anybody else for this Green Bay offense that we're kind of excited about? Is Aaron Rodgers somebody that's in play for those in the fantasy playoffs versus the Rams this week?
I hope you have a better option. But I mean, I don't hate it versus the Rams. The real, I think, other thing you can exploit this on the offensive side is whichever Rams back, which lately it's been Akers. The Packers are a terrible run.
Terrible.
I mean, awful. They're terrible at tackling the line of scrimmage back, all those things. I mean, everything. So if I was doing a showdown on Monday, that's probably what I'd go with as a captain is whatever Rams running back you think is going to get the most.
Yeah. Oh, well, here's my question I would want to, and limiting upside for Lazard or Christian Watson. Does Romeo Doubs' return catch the eye of Aaron Rodgers? Does he even look his way? And do we think that it's even going to be something to even monitor? Will he get enough snaps to even be relevant whatsoever?
I think back to, a lot of the talk that was going around right before Doubs went out with injury. And Aaron Rodgers just, I think through the media was very vocal about like the consistency and the drops that Doubs was having and them needing to get more players, more playing time, insert Christian Watson. And then, the rest is history here. It's hard for me to think that when Aaron Rodgers locks in on a receiver, he locks in on a receiver. We saw that with Devonta Adams for years. So to answer your question, I don't think Doubs, if he does play, takes away too much volume. For DFS purposes, if Doubs is playing and Christian Watson is playing, is there any rationale for a bargain tier play on Romeo Doubs this week versus the Rams, Keith?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, if he's playing in a showdown, which is where you're just picking one game, absolutely, because he'll be probably nothing. I haven't looked at the prices yet for Monday, but he would be – to me, you always try to look for one or two guys when you're doing a showdown, which is just, again, from one game, that are going to be like $2,000 or less. And most weeks they're not going to score any points. And that's okay, because what you're trying to do is make sure your captain is somebody who's going to score a lot of points because they get 1.5 times extra points being the captain, and then have three other guys kind of in the string. Cam Akers or Montgomery, PPR season long, week 1 playoffs. Whew, that's tough.
Yeah, it is.
I actually can't believe I'm saying this, but I kind of like Akers over Montgomery just because, I mean, the Packers are so bad against the run to where.
Right. Do you expect him to lean on Baker Mayfield in this matchup or the running game for this match? Here's the thing. I'm with Akers here. He fumbled the ball last week, and they still gave him touches. So normally they're not going to yank him just because of poor performance, poor play. Versus Montgomery, I was wishfully thinking that they're going to get goal line opportunities. The Chicago Bears, that is, earlier.
Because you don't have to worry about Baker stealing Akers touchdowns in the red zone, to where obviously with Montgomery you got to worry about Fields's. I would say, because I know Donald, the question that I would ask is, do you think the Rams can hang with the Packers? Because if the answer to that is yes, I definitely like Cam Akers. If the answer to that to you is no, I would play Montgomery.
There we go.
Agreed.
And that's going to wrap up our Week 15 round 1 of the Fantasy Football Playoffs pregame show. Thank you very much for tuning in. You all know where to find us at Fantasy and Frames all over on social media. I want to say a special shout out to the people who are following us most recently on TikTok. We put in our start and sit TikTok reel. We put out all the reels for all our articles. All got great number of views, but the start and sit TikTok reel, we have close to 7,000 views on that. We're putting out YouTube shorts. We're putting out all sorts of video content everywhere. The website traffic has been fantastic. The podcast listens have been great, and views have been great. So thank you very much for all your patronage. We appreciate you. And we're going to get you to the next round of the playoffs. We're going to see you right back here next week. There will be a
no, we won't.
Well, I'll be here next week. I know Christmas is here next week. I'll be here on Sunday morning for a short amount of time. I'll also be here on Saturday for the pregame show for the Saturday slate. So tune in next week. Obviously, our podcast nights are Wednesdays and Thursdays. Stay tuned for that. And yeah, so for Keith, for Nate, gentlemen, good luck this week in your matchups, except you, Nate, because we're taking on each other in the Fantasy and Frame Staff League. But for all the rest of your matchups, good luck here. And for you folks out there, have a great week 15. Take it easy.
See you guys.